Welcome. This is Nikki from PRPS, Director of Training and Get Outdoors PA. Thank you for joining us for our Community Center Roundtable. This was requested that we do another follow-up for the community centers, so we're going to do that. And the primary reason was with most of our departments being in different color phases right now, the request was to see kind of, for those of you who might be open, what issues or what pros and cons have you seen so far? And for those of you who are getting ready to open, what questions do you have that maybe the group can answer, or myself, BK, who is our director of the Park Maintenance Institute, he is on the call as well. So if either of us can answer questions, and of course, if not, we can look to some of our other professionals in the field to get those questions answered. So as a reminder, you can use the chat box, which is in just the little quote box at the bottom of your screen. If you don't want to speak up, go ahead and use the chat box. But first off, how many people on the call have opened their centers at this point? Nope.
No, we're still in yellow here. Nothing open yet.
In Bethel Park, we've opened our community center just strictly for a childcare situation, so Monday through Friday. And starting July, we're going to open up for any rentals that had already fulfilled all of their obligations, so that's going to be less than normal.
Okay. Kathy, can I ask you, are you a certified child care center, or you're just opening it for child care at this point in time?
We have partnered with a child care center that operates usually in the school district, and so they brought all of their certifications and whatnot with them, insurances, so we're basically just providing a space.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And as far as your rentals, have you had a lot of issues with people who may have had to cancel their rental or want to reschedule at this point, or are they understanding of the situation?
All of the ones we canceled for June were very understanding. We did allow them to rebook a date in the future, but probably I would say half of our rentals have canceled, or they've significantly reduced the number of people they expect. And we are not taking new reservations for the summer. We're just honoring the people that had already been on our books.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to let us know? There are a few responses in the chat box. I'll get to those, but does anyone want to speak up and report out? Okay. So in Delaware County, they're still in the yellow, and they're hoping to go to green in late June or early July, so they have not opened. Same thing in Conshohocken, I don't know, I always have a hard time saying it. They have not opened. They are opening next Monday for camp only. And back to Delaware County, they, the Haverford Township building, they had a polling center on Election Tuesday and several Red Cross blood drives. So they have been open for specific purposes. For those of you who have opened, even if it's for a specific purpose, are you taking temperatures? Are you requiring masks? Are you following any different safety protocols as far as cleaning and sanitation than you were before? And I see in Montgomery Township, you had 4 blood drives as well, not using the building for programming in the summer, except for fitness. Great. For the blood drive, since we've had a couple people say they've done that, are there specific sanitation requirements for that specific purpose?
For the blood drive?
Yeah.
We made sure it was sanitary on our end, but it's really the Red Cross's show at that point. We just kind of gave the space out. Okay.
And Larry in Haverford reported that masks, yes, but temperatures for staff only. So I've seen a couple different things. I've whether it's on social media or through various emails. One thing that we have seen is there's a difference between some people are taking daily temperatures, recording it, making sure that happens before people enter their facility, and then other people are not doing temperature checks, but are requiring masks, primarily for staff. And of course, it's encouraged for some children, but not required. Sorry, I'm just trying to get all the people admitted. Lauren, they have sneeze guards at reception area, and they do temperature checks for staff, and they'll be required to provide and wear their own mask. Fantastic.
We're basically doing the same thing in Bethel. Our sneeze guards should be installed this week. We take temperature of staff. The daycare that's in our building, they take temperatures before they allow the children in. They anticipated their staff wearing masks, but
Okay.
that after day 2 because their reasoning was that they were scaring the children. But their information to the parents does say that they are masked, so it's a little disingenuous, I guess.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm trying to, I did receive an email with some extra questions. I'm trying to get to that now. BK, did you want to go ahead and ask that question so it's not just my voice? I'll let you go ahead while I look for these other questions.
Sure. I was just wondering if any folks have started thinking about signage for social distancing, like when you go into Walmart, you see one way in, one way out, or spots on the floor stand this far away from each other. As people started thinking about those things, what are you doing?
Yeah, in Montgomery Township, we have a stanchion set up, so you have to go a certain way to get into the line for reception, plus these yellow stickers that go on the ground. We kind of direct everyone to a certain point and keep the flow that way.
Fantastic.
Here in Bethlehem Township, we're planning the same thing as Derek, thinking one way in and a separate way out of the building. And then we're planning to move cardio equipment all around the facility so that it's 6 feet apart from one another. So we're utilizing like our multi-purpose space, canceling any rentals for the future, and then putting our equipment there.
Great. And
Our
Jackie,
gymnasium.
are you still in yellow at this point?
Yeah, we're at Northampton County, so we're just north of like Bucks County.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I know Monroe and I think Pike are going to green soon or have. So I didn't know how close you were to that.
Yeah, we're probably closer to the Bucks County, Berks County, Lehigh County area. So
Okay.
we're all still in yellow.
I'm sorry to hear that. But
Yeah.
feel that much different at times.
Yeah.
So, some of the questions I'm going through that we received via email go back to rentals a lot. So Jackie, you mentioned you canceled rentals. Some are keeping what they have once they open, but has there been a lot of discussion on future rentals through the end of 2020? I mean, I know you said, Jackie, canceling for the future. Is that until you're green and then you'll reconsider? Or what are other people thinking at this point?
I don't think that we'll resume rentals until we're phased out, because we want to keep that space for our equipment. Our outside pavilion rentals are also canceled until further notice. So until we're allowed to have more than the given number of people, I think they'll remain that way.
We're kind of doing the same thing. I think something that we're considering just as a factor is when you do a program, it's our thing. We're watching it the whole time versus a rental. We're not going to stand there and be like, oh, this is your wedding party, but we're going to be your police.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, I think our other thing is, we'd rather, if there's capacity restraints, we'd rather see more members in our facility than a private rental, because we are a fully membership-based facility.
That makes sense. Absolutely. Just a report out on the floor, Lauren had mentioned that they will have hand sanitizing stations at the entrance, and campers are required to use them when they enter the building, but they did not consider marks on the floor at this time. I know from up here, we had them in grocery stores for a while, now that they're in some of the other retailers that are open, and It's great to have them. Most people pay attention. Every once in a while someone doesn't. But that is one thing I've seen work rather well in this area. It works, I think, better than people putting masks on at this point in the green phase. Has anyone found any external funding sources for PPE, so protective gear, or specialized cleaning facility? Derek, I believe you were using the misters, or you had given us some links for misters. I think it was you. But has anyone found any outside sources, or have you had anyone step up to provide funding for those things?
Our county is running a grant program right now that you can submit for some sort of reimbursement. So we're working on that.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Similar here, nothing specifically for recreation, but our township has a COVID fund set up. I think it's a similar type of program.
Derek, was that part of a different fund that they reallocated monies for, or was that totally brand new and they found money somewhere?
I'm not sure how they came up with it. All I know is they said use this this GL code and we're good.
Okay.
I said okay.
I always get interested to see where they're able to reallocate funds from. Larry in Haverford mentioned they are using signage, one entry, one exit, and limiting participants by appointment only initially. Oh, that's interesting. So on the hour, it looks like they're allowing people to enter the walking track and fitness center, and PPE was provided by their township emergency management department. So that's a suggestion I have heard from other people on our various other roundtables is local emergency management does have some PPE available for shared use. I don't know, it's probably different everywhere you go. Ours is very volunteer based. Or some areas up here are volunteer based and others are not. So I'd be interested to see the differences between those. Any other thoughts on funding available for PPE, cleaning supplies, anything like that? All right. This is a question that it's kind of related to community centers, but if you have a playground attached to your facility, are you utilizing it? Are you limiting participation to campers only? Some feedback we've had already is public aren't allowed to use it when the Park and Rec department are utilizing it for camp or daycare. So interested to see if you're using your playground and if you've increased your sanitation. So some areas are spraying their playground equipment and some are just saying it's used at your own risk.
And how about, a question with that is, how about your porta potties and your bathrooms?
I think that's a great question. Any thoughts? BK, can you speak up to sanitation with restrooms and or porta-johns? Is there a recommendation one over the other that you know of?
There's across the states, or I'd say across the country, there's different approaches of doing things. Some folks are going as frequent as they just do hourly wipe downs using bleach water, and they just have a checklist right there on the doors. Other places have still kept things locked up. So it seems to make a difference on what is the traffic going through those porta-johns. If people are deciding it's not safe for their own staff, they're choosing not to do regularly cleaning them kind of thing, other than they job it out to the third party. So a lot of the times they are on a rental situation and they're kind of passing the buck on that responsibility. And again, it goes back to probably a weekly cleaning on some of those when you see, you know.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
So, as I was reading the guidelines, I'm from South Hanover Township in Dauphin County. They were saying about, because we have a lot of fields, and they were talking about having our porta potties that are in our different fields sanitized daily. Well, for the company to come do that, the company that puts them there that we rent from, it's $17 a day. Obviously my public works and our staff, our Parks and Rec staff, I can't have them going in and cleaning porta potties. And then we have a park, a nice park bathroom that, hey, I can go in and spray some Lysol around each morning on my way in. But I don't know how people are going to sanitize these places. We only opened this Friday, so it's sort of, that's why I was jumping in here to see if anybody had recommendations.
If you're looking for a definitive answer that we can say, you know, do it this way, we can't give that. I can give suggestions of things that I have seen. I mean, it's gone as much as using a pump sprayer with bleach water and then you just let it dry. You know, so there's just cleaning times. You put a sign on it, you say not in use or being cleaned, and then you shut them down, open it back up when they're ready. That's the quick and dirty answer.
And I think a discussion that has come up in multiple conversations has been, you know, one has to take ownership amongst themselves as well. So utilizing, whether it's a community center, a park, or even parents sending kids to summer camp, you know, there is always, there should be, I'm not going to say there is, assumption of risk, right? So that's why with campers at summer camp, there's waivers. Now there's COVID statements on those waivers. But I think, you know, if you're going into a facility, you have to be mindful that they may have cleaned it and the person going in right before you could have had COVID. But even before these times, they may have cleaned it and the one person in front of you could have had something else that's still contagious. So there's been a big discussion of when do we allow, you know, people to be responsible for themselves, you know, providing hand sanitizing stations, or if it's a full restroom, you know, having, you know, making sure that soap and paper towels are ample and not running out. You know, we have to kind of, you know, put the expectation that people know, and that can be through signage. So letting them know when the cleaning takes place, you know, even providing a phone number. So if they do run out of soap or something, that they could let the park department know right away. So I have other thoughts on, you know, letting people, I guess, adult themselves and take that responsibility into their own hands. What are thoughts on that? I mean, obviously we all know this world can be so happy. But I've also heard, and this is just something I heard, so I can't speak to it being fact, is that it's hard to trace back where someone may have gotten COVID. So they may have been to the park, but they may have been to the grocery store, and they may have gone to Lowe's that day. So specifically pointing out where they may have gotten it, if they even get it, would be difficult. So thoughts on, you know, letting our park visitors, our community center visitors or participants kind of take that assumption of risk.
I had a conversation with our solicitor just recently, and I think the option of allowing participants to take the assumption of risk in the eye of a solicitor doesn't exist. So for us here in Bethlehem Township, unfortunately, we won't have that option. Even like the waiver signage necessarily doesn't really hold up. So, you know, he'll be ultimately taking, you know, all precautions necessary. So we have nothing open here in our municipality. We have no restrooms open, no playgrounds open, nothing. We're fully closed.
So they're closed. Are people still using the playground equipment? Obviously, if a bathroom's closed, hopefully they're not getting in. But other park facilities that have been closed, are they still using them anyway?
Minimally, yes.
Okay. We saw that up here too. I always saw kids on the playground and thought, well, okay. Going back to restrooms, Lauren said that they're only open for camp. However, one of the staff members will sanitize after a camp staff member uses the restroom. They have a single bathroom that will be used. So for now, they're not, they won't use any other restroom facilities. So they have a single bathroom and it will be sanitized after use. Thank you for sharing that, Lauren. That staff member better get a bonus, I think, in their camp salary, unless they all get to take turns. But that's fantastic. What other questions do you have that either we may have heard other people who have opened their centers talking about, or that you're still concerned with as far as opening your center?
I'm a little concerned when we open up for rentals starting in July, because we haven't determined what we're going to require of people. We can funnel them to come in a door and go right to their rental rooms, but the bathrooms are common use area, and eventually I'm sure somebody's going to need to come to the front desk. And reality is we're not going to be able to enforce everybody wearing a mask there. So our thought was that they were required when they're out of their rental space and in the more common areas, but we don't have any feedback from anybody else that they're planning that or they've done it with any success. So I guess my question is to the group, have you heard anything? Are you doing anything similar?
Just a reminder, if you want to speak up there, to unmute yourself in the bottom left hand of your screen, there's a little microphone. You can unmute yourself, and of course, if you can't use your audio, please feel free to use the group chat. And Kathy, one thing I'll say is that might be a great question for us to ask in our weekly scoop. Specifically, how are people, either requiring or suggesting masks when they're in that common area? I know restaurants up here, obviously you're not going to use a mask when you're sitting down and eating, but if you get up to use the restroom, if you get up to even walk through, I went to a restaurant Friday and we were eating outside, but you have to still walk through the restroom or not the restroom, the restaurant, and you had to have your mask on that whole time that you're in the facility. So I think that's a great question, and if you want, we can ask that in the scoop, and then I can distribute the replies that we received to the community center roundtable group.
That would be great.
Fantastic. With that said, if you've not been on a community center roundtable, please put your name and email address in the chat box so we can make sure you get the follow-up. And of course, if you have any other questions that come up, we always try to find the answers when we can. We are not the ones running community centers, but we talk to a lot of people who are. So we can usually put you in touch with someone or try to figure out the best scenario for questions. So did anyone have thoughts on that? So common areas, are you going to require or encourage masks? Okay. Other questions that you may have? I always like to go back to how has this, really impacted you financially? Obviously, it's one thing not having rentals or having to hold off on programs, but also the increased cost of sanitation and PPE. How have you been handling that with your budgets? Have you been able to kind of stay steady, because with less people coming in, there's less expenses, but of course, opening back up, you're going to have quite a different feel for things. So how has your budget been impacted? And what does that mean for next year? Will you incorporate these protocols into your budget for next year, just in case this horrible thing is still going on? Or are we hoping that 2021 will be a glimmer of hope and unlike it is right now?
The only comment I have on that is I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to manage the budget. I've got a
Okay.
director that does it, so I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else? I know it's a hard thing. When I managed a community center, we didn't do that many rentals. So for us, I think if we would have had to close, it would have been one thing. It would have been the programs that impacted us the most. So I don't know if that's like that for a lot of other people, but that would have hit hard. Let's see. As far as your equipment, obviously a lot of you have fitness equipment, but for going back to any programs you might be holding, childcare or camps, what are your protocols when it comes to that equipment? So more recreation equipment versus fitness equipment. Again, feel free to put it in the chat box or unmute yourself.
We canceled all of our summer programming for the kids. We also do not plan to open our childcare when we reopen. So, and no child classes. So we are avoiding that issue.
Okay. Linda, are you trying to talk? Because I have not been able to hear you. I saw your mute go off. Let me try to, I can try to unmute you again. I still can't hear you, but if you want to type in the chat box, I'd be happy to provide that feedback from your statements. We'll give that just a minute. Other concerns you have prior to opening at this point?
I think one of our biggest concerns is staffing when we reopen. Has anybody given thought to decreasing hours to make sure that you have adequate staffing? I mean, we're open 5:30 a.m., 10 p.m., 7 days a week, indoor pool, outdoor pool. So we require a lot of staff. We just don't know how many of them are going to come back.
Right.
No.
Yeah, we're in a similar boat. It's a good question. We're going from 5:30 to 9, 10 o'clock at night to just 8 o'clock. That's really the only thing we've talked about so far. But like you said, you have 2 pools, etc. We just have a building here, which is a little bit easier.
And I think that's a great question. And going back to that too, when you do open and you have staff, if they go away on vacation or go away for a holiday, what do you do when they come back? You know, are you making them quarantine for 14 days? Are you, you know, requiring tests? I know some agencies, not necessarily in Pennsylvania, but have said that testing is going to be highly recommended when people come back. You know, if you look at a lot of the state universities, they're specifically closing before the holidays to kind of prevent that go away and come back and maybe, you know, community spread. So with that staffing question, I think that's fantastic if anyone has any other feedback. And then how are you managing staff who want to take vacation or go away? And BK, thank you. He shared public assistance funding from FEMA for COVID for PPE. That is located in the chat box. I'll also make sure it's included in our follow-up. Linda, your question is great. You're in a green county and it's your understanding that you don't have to clean wooden structures on the playground. Boy, I think it would be hard to clean wooden structures. I mean, cleaning the actual slide itself might be one thing, but BK, have you heard anything about wooden play structures at this point?
A lot of the states are not worrying about wood because the CDC doesn't have any data on how long things last on that kind of surface. Again, you can always power wash and things like that, so if you're still looking for options, but no, there is no data out there on wood. So, but I also hesitate too, because most of your connecting points and all of your handles, I mean, all of that's still metal. So there still is other surfaces, even though it is a wooden structure, unless
Right.
it's a completely tinker toy kind of playset.
Yeah, and I think putting up that signage to letting people know, you know, that we're still in, I mean, green doesn't mean we're all free to do whatever, but putting up signage about COVID and, you know, the realities of what may be expected, I think that's always, you know, a kind of cover your rear end kind of thing. And, oh, great, so you're cleaning the plastic and metal grab bars. I think that's probably the best thing you can do, don't you? I mean, I can't think of anything else because, again, even power washing, the amount of time it would take, the amount of, it's just unrealistic, I think.
The cost benefits wouldn't come back.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So some of the questions that I'll do with a follow-up from this is, we do have a good amount of contacts. So what we can do is we can ask them, one, in our scoop, we can ask them on the What's Up Park and Rec page if it's on Facebook. And those are some of the questions that we can ask, and we usually get some good feedback. So I'll pull those questions from the group chat when I'm processing this to see if we can get some more information on the staffing, on the playgrounds, and of course, how people are enforcing or making recommendations for mask use in common areas. Yes, you thought green would be clear, but it's not. I totally agree. It's still confusing in places, but hopefully, Linda, things will continue to look up. Again, I know this is a smaller group today. Oh,
There's big pushes in a lot of the youth sports and things right now too. So I think as we start seeing protocols coming out of other industries, the changes will just be adapted.
agreed. And we are working on developing some of the, we have the pandemic page from PRPS. So that tends to have a lot of information, and we do try to share more information as we get it. So that's always a great page to look. Linda asked, does anyone have an 8.5 by 11 printable sign file? I think we have some that we've had through previous, so I can look for those. And Linda, I do believe I saw your name and email address in there. So, but does anyone else have one that they're utilizing for either your community center or any adjacent facilities? And that can just be COVID warnings, it can be cleaning and sanitation policies, so anything like that.
I think the CDC website has a bunch of them you can print out.
They do. They absolutely do. And we can, we'll share that site as well. I'm making notes now to share that in the follow-up document. I would try to do it now, but one of my screens is being a little fussy.
I just have another question as well. How's everybody interpreting the 50% capacity? Are you using like your each room fire code, or are you using what your typical day capacity is and cutting it in half? Or I don't know, Derek, if you guys are contemplating like reservation by the hour, reservation by machine.
It's kind of a mix for us between each room and the full building. So there's kind of two numbers there. So let's say one room holds up to 80 people. We'll do 40 people up to that in that room. And then let's say the capacity for the building is, let's say 500, 250 in the entire building would be the secondary criteria. We haven't talked about reservation like timing when they come in yet for the building, just for the spray park at this point.
Are you also, when you do open, if there's people using the same room, how much time are you giving in between activities or rentals or just use of that room for cleaning? I know that's something we're looking into for next year's conference. We've seen that some large venues are requiring about twice as much time in between our educational sessions for cleaning. Which changes everything. So we're in touch with Hershey to see what their protocols are. But are you providing basically a layover time for staff to get in and clean a room before someone else uses it?
TBD right now. Typically, we've always had an hour regardless.
Okay.
So we don't know if that's to expand, but for the foreseeable future, we'll just do one rental per day, probably.
Okay.
Safe.
I've found a couple great plans from some facilities in Ohio that have already reopened. A lot of them are suggesting logs. So every time a participant uses a piece of equipment, they have to log it out. They wipe it down, and then a staff member wipes it down. So we've kind of been modeling their plans for when we reopen. But I didn't know if maybe people were doing reservations by hours to limit. Is we have a walking track. So I don't, you obviously don't want 25 people walking around the track at one time.
Jackie, do you have the links or those documents that you would mind sharing with their group, and we can make sure they get those as well?
Yeah, I have printouts of them, so I can scan them and I can email them to you.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat box now. That would be fantastic. Oh, putting my wrong email address. There we go. Yeah, I think the hour in between is great, but also that's a tough question, because if you do it by the hour and then people don't show up, then you're missing out on people actually utilizing that piece of equipment or facility. Oh, PK, thank you for sharing the CDC guidelines. But it's similar with swimming pools. I think at this point they're going through something similar with one limiting capacity. We've seen some people who are doing reservation systems for their swimming pools. So very similar questions, and I can look through some of that to see how other people have done them as well. We have about, these usually go an hour, but this is a small group. There's about 20 minutes left. So final questions, or is there anything PRPS can look into aside from those few things we've already discussed that might be able to provide you with some answers or clarification? Obviously, we are not the ones who set the CDC guidelines or the state criteria, but we do try to get as much information from them as we can. Oh, Larry, he said that his walking track is 1/13 of a mile, and they are doing 15 participants per hour with more than 6 feet social distancing between them. Any last minute things or things that PRPS can look into? As a reminder, put your name and email address in the chat box. We'll make sure you get follow-ups, and we will look for other information that might be helpful. When Jackie shares those documents, I'll make sure they go out with our follow-up email as well.
Hi, Nikki. This is Jackie O'Doherty. I'm also in Haverford Township here with Larry. And I have a question about guidelines as far as fitness classes, because the capacity of a room, for instance, when we have the fire codes, even if we do the 6 feet social distancing, with certain classes, you have a lot of lateral movement and people moving about the room. And I know that there are guidelines for other fitness facilities, and so we're looking into those and of course following and adhering to those guidelines. But I was wondering if PRPS had any guidelines as far as fitness classes and what we think would be, because when we think about what the capacity should be, it's far, far less than regular use of the room, and certainly for fire code. Is there anything that you can speak to on that?
So I'm trying to pull up the PRPS. So we put out recommended guidelines. And essentially that was the PRPS staff taking from CDC and the state, and it's our interpretation and suggestions of how you could move forward. So I'm opening those right now. The last update was June 3rd. So we haven't seen much new information come down from them, but I'm going to open those to see if I can answer that question a little better. In the meantime, BK, if you have any thoughts and want to speak up while I get to that proper page. The set of guidelines that PRPS distributed are on the pandemic website under planning and recovery. And I just want to get down and see if we...
While you're looking, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say the biggest thing is depending on your area that each individual is really going to need. Like you said, your physical activities are going to change. It's different when you're doing yoga on a mat than it is when you're doing CrossFit and moving around. So one idea might be to create, like you saw in San Francisco and many other parks where they had social distancing areas. So like circles on the ground, and then that way you have an average space and make sure those spaces are 6 feet apart. Obviously, when you're doing fitness, there's aspiration, a lot of, breathing heavy and things like that. So who says how far that's traveling? So I don't know if you can keep that inside of a circle, really. Some people grunt more than others.
When I work out. So we do on our suggested guidelines, we do have a page for gyms, tracks, and fitness studios. And I'm sorry, I had to look it up. It's a long document. I think we've all looked at it here 1,000 times, so it's just become gray matter. But what phase are you in right now, Jackie? And you're in yellow.
We're still in yellow and hoping to go to green soon. Like within we're going to go to green at the beginning of July, approximately July 6th.
So for our green phase, basically we do say adhere to group gathering guidelines and 6-foot social distancing. But the recommendation for square foot and capacity, and again, this is not regulation or rule. This is just how we interpreted the best recommendations moving forward. It says 36 square feet per person represents social distancing, and max of 90 people per active zone if physical distancing is not possible. Now, with that 90 people, I would say obviously that depends on the size of your space, because if you put 90 people in my office, they're all crammed in. But I think the 36 square foot per person kind of gives you a better defined area for that active area. So if it's yoga, if it's a more active like dance aerobics class, that might be beneficial. It also goes into limiting shared equipment and cleaning and sanitizing after each use. And then, having a staff person sign them in. Obviously, the only thing allowed in is water or a sports drink kind of thing, no food. And of course, signage is also located up there as well. But I think with our recommendations, and again, these are things that we have been changing frequently, but this one I believe has been set for quite a while, is 36 square feet per person.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Thanks, BK. And we are looking into doing the squares on the ground, and like marking that off with tape or with as you said, with circles. And so that's something that we're certainly going to err on the side of caution. And for classes where everyone's fairly stationary, such as the yoga or a Pilates class, the 36 square feet seems really, that seems very doable. And I think we'll probably leave even more space around for classes that are and put those in the biggest rooms of all, when people are really moving around, or so there's lots of aspiration.
Yeah.
So we'll just continue to err on the side of caution and make sure that everyone has ample room, even in excess of the 36 square. Right. Thank you.
Yes, and I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think, you know, it's the person's going to determine if they're comfortable with that or not. So if they came to the first class and they felt that that was still too close for them, I know refunds for a lot of departments have been very fluid. So people have been more willing to provide a refund or a discount at this time if someone came to a class and just decided, you know what, that 36 square foot isn't enough for me personally. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Or maybe when advertising the class, you could even, you know, do a photo of how you're social distancing for the class. So a photo of the room with the squares on the ground. That might give people an idea of what they're walking into, which I think is good too, because then they don't get there and they're like, oh wait, I have to stay in this space. Or I always feel it's better to throw more information at them so they know than when they get there and then they could be upset about it. But as we all know, this is the time where some people are really happy with what everyone's doing and some people are just never going to be pleased. So I think you have a great plan in place.
Thanks, Nikki. I love that idea. I love that idea of having a photo sent out so that people can really see, you know, we're prepared, we're ready for you. This is what to expect. And I also love the idea of, you know, make sure, you know, so we've always done that. If people aren't comfortable in any way, then absolutely the full refund is available to them. And one of the things we've also been doing is we've been running our classes online through the Zoom meetings. And so we are looking to do both for people who don't feel comfortable coming back to the facility yet, that we will stream the class so that they can have access to it from their home if they aren't ready to come back quite yet. And so we'll be offering both live classes and online classes simultaneously.
And I think that's fantastic. I'm sorry, BK, I saw you getting ready to speak. I think the blended learning is a great option to provide for people, because even if they're okay with social distancing, they may have a health problem that maybe limits them from being around other people, but allowing them a chance to still participate is fantastic. I know that's something PRPS is looking into, is some blended learning for moving forward. So absolutely great idea. And Larry mentioned utilizing the gym for fitness classes, and they won't have basketball initially, no open gym. I think that's good too. The larger facilities you can, to give people more space, is always, even if it's just something for peace of mind, it helps. BK, I didn't know if you wanted to.
That's something that using other facilities creatively are things that we may need to really think about more. Think of those open areas, even in your lobbies, and, you know, and just repurposing. I even see fitness classes going on basketball courts outside here in the parks around me. And a colleague of mine is actually a personal trainer. And since he can't get into gyms anymore, they run steps, and they go out and they use park areas and the pavilions that people can't rent. All of those kind of spaces can be repurposed for ideas.
Absolutely. Just to follow up with some of that, BK, I agree. I even see there's little plots of land over near where my apartment is, and I don't think anyone owns it, but they were CrossFit. I don't know if they are anymore, but they were always there every morning. They were utilizing that space, and I think it's because it was free. Bethlehem Township planning to use the gym as well. And yeah, Derek, every space is multi-purpose. I think that's a very important point. So it sounds like people have a lot of good ideas for moving forward and following the proper protocol. Is there anything else that we can answer, or questions you may have at this time? Well, the one thing I'll say, we'll wrap up. It's just a few minutes early, but please feel free to email PRPS. I did put my email in the chat box. I'll drop it in there again so you don't have to scroll back up. But if you have questions, if there's stuff you need clarification for, you know, we always try to see what we can find. And the only other thing, I know we sent out a survey for people who participate in the roundtable, but do you want a follow-up in about 2 or 3 weeks for community centers, specifically when some of you get closer to opening or will be opening, we can do this again. You know, sometimes we get huge turnout, sometimes we get something smaller like today, but even with a smaller group, as you see from today's discussion, it was very beneficial. So if you want us to do another roundtable, just let us know. You can put yes in the chat box, or you can always email us here at PRPS. And if there's no other questions, then we'll say thank you for popping on. So we're getting some yeses for about 2 weeks. So absolutely, we'll get something scheduled. But if there's no other questions, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great week. And we'll see you in about 2 weeks.